Imagine stepping onto a commercial plane the day before Thanksgiving. You, you find your seat, settle in, maybe order a bourbon.
Right, just a totally normal Wednesday.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But over the next few hours, you casually steal $200,000. And this is the crazy part, you step out the back door of a commercial jet mid-flight and literally vanish into thin air.
Yeah, you don't just pull off a heist, you completely erase yourself from existence.
It's wild. And that void, that total disappearance, is exactly what we are exploring in this deep dive today.
Because it's a sequence of events that fundamentally breaks our understanding of how the world is supposed to work.
Right.
I mean, when a crime occurs, especially one this brazen, we are conditioned to expect a resolution. There's an investigation, a suspect, and eventually consequences.
You expect someone to get caught.
Exactly. But when you examine the source material we are looking at today, which is Skyward Ghost, the mystery of D.B. Cooper, you are basically left staring into a total void.
And our mission today is to dive right into that void. We want to reconstruct the timeline of November 24th, 1971.
Yeah, we really need to dig into the bizarre physical evidence or lack thereof and analyze the psychological tactics used to control an entire aircraft.
Right, and try to figure out how a person pulling off a meticulously planned hijacking could simultaneously execute what looks like, well, a completely suicidal getaway.
To understand the sheer shock of this event, you really have to place yourself in the mundane reality of that era.
Yeah, 1971 was a different world.
It really was. It's Thanksgiving Eve. Air travel didn't involve TSA checkpoints or, body scanners or even ID verifications.
You could literally just walk off the street, buy a ticket with cash, and stroll directly onto the tarmac.
Which is exactly what happened at Portland International Airport. A man approaches the Northwest Orient Airlines counter and buys a $20 one-way ticket for Flight 305 to Seattle.
Okay, let's unpack this right here at the start, because there is a massive public misconception we need to clear up before we even look at the evidence.
Oh, you mean the name?
Yes, the name. We all know the cultural legend of D.B. Cooper.
Right.
But the reality is, D.B. Cooper never actually existed.
It's true.
That name is a total fiction. The man bought his ticket under the alias Dan Cooper.
Yeah, the DB moniker was just a rapid-fire reporting error by a journalist who was on a strict deadline.
Right. They confused the suspect's alias with another local man the FBI briefly questioned that night.
Exactly. But the media printed DD, and it just stuck permanently. It really demonstrates how quickly a chaotic investigation can mutate into folklore.
It totally does.
Yeah.
The authorities were scrambling so fast to make sense of what was happening, the basic facts were distorted within hours.
But going back to that terminal on Portland, the man holding the ticket for Dan Cooper boards the Boeing 727.
And he is, by all accounts, remarkably unremarkable.
Yeah, just a middle-aged guy wearing a dark business suit, a white shirt, a narrow black tie, and slip-on loafers.
Right, and he's carrying a dark briefcase and a paper bag. He sits down in seat 18C, right in the back of the plane.
Which was a very strategic choice, by the way.
Oh, absolutely. And to me, the most terrifying part of this entire event isn't violence.
No, not at all.
It isn't a guy screaming, waving a weapon, or taking hostages at gunpoint. It is the sheer, chilling politeness of his methodology.
Yeah, he waits until the plane takes off, and then he casually hands a folded note to a flight attendant named Florence Schaffner.
And you have to think about the culture of air travel in 1971.
Right. Schaffner is a 23-year-old flight attendant dealing with a cabin full of businessmen.
She assumes this quiet guy in the suit is just slipping her his hotel room number.
Yeah, she doesn't even look at the note. She just drops it directly into her purse and walks away.
I mean, imagine that. You are in the middle of executing what will become the most infamous hijacking in aviation history, and your ransom note just gets filed away unread.
It's almost comical.
It really is. But Cooper doesn't panic. He waits until she walks back past him, leans in quietly, and says, "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb."
And just like that, he fundamentally alters the reality of the flight, completely without raising his voice.
It's chilling. So when Schaffner finally reads the note, what does it say?
It demands $200,000 in negotiable American currency, 4 parachutes, and a fuel truck waiting on the tarmac in Seattle.
But, a note is just paper. Anyone can write a note.
Exactly. To ensure compliance, Cooper instructs her to sit down next to him, and he slowly opens his briefcase.
And inside, she sees 8 red cylinders, wires coated in red insulation, and a large cylindrical battery.
Right. Now, our source notes that forensic experts still debate to this day whether that bomb was actually functional or if it was just a prop made of road flares.
But you have to put yourself in Florence Schaffner's shoes in that specific second. You see wires, you see batteries, you believe him.
Oh, 100%. And the fascinating psychological mechanic at play here is what we call threat containment.
Tell me more about that.
Well, think about it. If Cooper jumps up in the aisle and shouts that he has a bomb, human instinct takes over.
Right, passengers start screaming.
Exactly. Someone might try to tackle him, or the pilots might just dive the plane to the nearest runway. Panic is highly contagious.
So by keeping it quiet,
By weaponizing his calmness and presenting the threat visually to a single person, he completely isolates the terror. He basically forces Schaffner to become his silent manager.
he's treating the hijacking like an administrative task. It's like he's a movie director who has storyboarded every single frame of a film.
That's a great way to put it.
While they're circling Seattle, burning off fuel so the plane can land safely, the passengers have absolutely no idea what is happening.
No, they are just told it's a minor mechanical delay.
And during this 2-hour holding pattern, Cooper actually orders a bourbon and soda. He even pays his tab and insists Schaffner keep the change.
Yeah, that detail always gets me.
I have a hard time reading that, honestly. Is ordering a cocktail and tipping the flight attendant a sign of ice-cold sociopathic confidence? Or is this the ultimate bluff? Is he a terrified amateur trying to use a drink to keep his own heart rate down?
Well, look at it as operational camouflage. Whether his heart was pounding out of his chest or not, he understood that projecting normalcy is the ultimate control tactic.
Right, because if the hijacker is casually sipping a bourbon, the flight attendant processes that visual cue.
Exactly. She thinks he's not erratic, he's not sweating, he has this under control, so I really shouldn't provoke him.
He manipulated the environment so effectively that when the plane finally landed in Seattle, the exchange was completely bloodless.
The FBI delivers the $200,000 and the parachutes.
And true to his word, Cooper releases all 36 passengers and a couple of the flight attendants.
Now, you would assume the story ends right there on the tarmac.
Right. He gets his money, he makes a run for a getaway car, or maybe he gets into a standoff with the FBI.
But instead, he keeps the pilots, a flight engineer, and one flight attendant on board.
And he dictates a new flight plan heading toward Mexico City.
And this is where the mechanics of his plan reveal a deep, highly specialized knowledge of aviation.
Because he didn't just pick any plane.
No, he chose Northwest Orient Flight 305 for a very specific reason. The Boeing 727 had a unique design feature called an aft air stair.
Basically a rear staircase that dropped down from the belly of the plane, just under the tail. Right?
Exactly. Boeing designed this feature so the 727 could operate out of smaller, rural airports that didn't have rolling staircases on the tarmac.
So the plane was entirely self-sufficient.
Right. But dropping a staircase while parked at an airport is one thing.
Cooper knew you could deploy it mid-flight.
Yes. And he gave the pilots highly specific operational parameters to make it happen.
Like what?
He ordered them to fly at a maximum altitude of 10,000 feet, keep the landing gear down, set the wing flaps at 15 degrees, and limit their speed to 100 knots.
Wow.
He even told them to keep the cabin unpressurized.
Those instructions are definitely not common knowledge.
Not at all. If you try to open a commercial aircraft door at 30,000 feet, the cabin pressure makes it physically impossible.
Because the door is essentially sealed shut by thousands of pounds of pressure.
Right, so by ordering the cabin unpressurized at 10,000 feet, he eliminated that pressure lock.
He knew exactly how slow the jet had to fly, and at what flap setting, to ensure the wind resistance wouldn't violently rip the deployed staircase right off the fuselage.
Which is incredible foresight.
But just think about the physics of that moment.
Yeah.
It's around 8:00 p.m. They are over the dense wilderness of Washington state. He sends the last crew member to the cockpit and locks them in.
And then the pilots notice a warning light flash on the dash.
The aft stairs are deploying. A few minutes later, the crew feels a sudden, violent change in air pressure.
To really understand that, imagine driving down the highway at 60 miles an hour and suddenly rolling down your window.
The wind rushing in, your ears popping.
Now scale that up to a commercial jet flying at 10,000 feet in the freezing rain.
He is standing alone at the top of a metal staircase, suspended in the freezing night sky.
Staring down into a pitch-black abyss.
Right. And below him is some of those rugged, unforgiving terrain in North America. Dense pine forests, jagged mountains, and freezing temperatures.
He ties the money bag to himself, straps on a parachute, and steps off the edge.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me. Because the technical contradiction here is where it gets genuinely confusing.
How so?
Well, we just established that this man had the operational knowledge of an aviation engineer.
Right. He knew the flap settings, the airspeed limits, the pressurization mechanics.
Yet he steps into a freezing, violent rainstorm over a mountain range wearing a business suit and slip-on loafers.
Yeah, it's pretty baffling.
I mean, stepping out into that storm in a suit and loafers is like showing up to climb Mount Everest in a tuxedo.
That is a perfect analogy.
He didn't bring a helmet. He didn't bring thermal gear or hiking boots. He didn't even bring a proper survival knife.
No, he was dressed for a corporate board meeting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how do you reconcile a mastermind who can engineer a mid-air deployment of a commercial staircase with a guy who jumps into a freezing forest in a trench coat?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, that paradox is exactly what drove the massive FBI investigation for the next 45 years.
Really? That specific contradiction?
Yeah, profilers and investigators constantly wrestled with that exact mismatch. They were looking at hundreds of suspects, military veterans, paratroopers, adventurers.
Right.
One camp argued he must have been a former military paratrooper or cargo loader who knew the aircraft intimately, but was perhaps so desperate or arrogant that he neglected basic survival prep.
And the other camp?
The opposing camp looked at the loafers and the weather conditions and concluded that he wasn't a mastermind at all.
He was just a guy who got incredibly lucky in the air.
Exactly, and died the second he hit the ground.
Which makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, if you jump out of a plane into a pine forest at night without any protective gear, the tree branches alone would tear you apart before you even hit the ground.
Oh, absolutely. Not to mention hypothermia. Let's look at the forensic reality of the Pacific Northwest. Many investigators firmly stood by the dead-in-the-woods theory because the environment there is incredibly hostile.
It's true wilderness.
And specifically, the soil in those dense pine forests is highly acidic.
Acidic.
Yeah, pine needles break down and create an environment that rapidly accelerates decomposition.
Wow. Okay.
If he broke his legs on impact or was knocked unconscious, he would have died of hypothermia within hours. And over a decade, that acidic soil would effectively dissolve bones.
You have to eat right through them.
Exactly. It would degrade the leather of his shoes, rot the nylon of the parachute. The forest would simply eat him.
Okay, I hear the soil acidity argument, and it definitely explains the lack of biological evidence.
Right.
But water and gravity move things based on density. Even if his bones dissolved, the bomb briefcase had metal cylinders, copper wires, and a heavy battery.
That's a fair point.
We are talking about titanium and steel components in the aircraft parts he interacted with. And the FBI ran massive grid searches.
Oh, huge. They used military helicopters, they put submersibles in the lakes, and they had hundreds of soldiers sweeping the terrain on foot.
And nothing was ever found. No parachute ripcord, no metal briefcases, no fragments of a suit. You can't tell me an acidic forest dissolved a metal battery.
No, it wouldn't. And that total absence of evidence forces us to look at the only physical clue that ever actually materialized.
And it didn't even show up for 9 years.
Right. In 1980, an 8-year-old boy named Brian Ingram was digging a fire pit on a sandy beach called Tina Bar, which is along the Columbia River.
And what does he find?
A few inches below the surface, he uncovers 3 bundles of decaying $20 bills.
The serial numbers were checked, and they were an exact match to the ransom money given to Dan Cooper in Seattle.
It is basically the holy grail of this investigation.
But the details of that discovery make the mystery infinitely more complicated. Because they didn't find $200,000.
No, they didn't.
They found exactly $5,800. And this is key. The rubber bands holding the bundles together were still intact.
Yeah, this discovery really fractured the investigation into 2 distinct theories.
Okay, laid them out.
The first theory supports the dead-in-the-woods argument we just discussed.
Oh, it did.
Hydrologists suggested that if Cooper died on impact in the mountains, years of rain and snowmelt could have washed a portion of the cash down the Washougal River.
And eventually deposited it on the banks of the Columbia River during a flood event. So what does this all mean? Let's apply some critical thinking to that hydrology theory.
Go for it.
If violent river currents are strong enough to rip cash away from a decaying body, tumble it down miles of jagged rocks and turbulent rapids, and bury it on a beach,
Yeah.
How do the fragile rubber bands survive?
That is the big question.
Rubber degrades incredibly fast in the elements. If those bundles were tumbling through a river system for 9 years, those rubber bands would have snapped and the bills would have dispersed individually.
They absolutely would have.
The fact that the bundles were perfectly intact, buried just below the surface in the sand, suggests they weren't deposited by a flood. It suggests they were intentionally placed there.
Which raises an important question, and it leads directly into the survival theory.
Exactly.
If the money didn't wash down a river naturally, someone had to bury it.
Right.
If Cooper survived the jump, perhaps he hiked to the river, buried a small fraction of the cash to lighten his load, or maybe he just lost it while trying to cross the water.
And the fact that only $5,800 was found means there is still roughly $194,000 completely unaccounted for.
Yep.
It is entirely possible that he pulled it off. He navigated the woods, bypassed the FBI search grids, and slipped right back into society.
And it's this exact debate, the completely ambiguous nature of the physical evidence, that makes this case immortal.
It really does. I mean, in 2016, after 45 years of chasing leads, interviewing suspects, and analyzing decaying currency, the FBI officially closed the Dan Cooper case.
They exhausted every scientific and investigative tool available, and they still had nothing. The closure of the case is almost unprecedented.
Yeah, especially today.
We live in an era where cold cases from the 1970s are routinely solved with forensic genealogy and DNA tracing.
But Cooper left no usable DNA.
Exactly. The FBI closing the file is a reluctant admission that human ingenuity, or perhaps just staggering luck, can still occasionally outmaneuver the entire apparatus of modern law enforcement.
And I think that lack of resolution is precisely why we are still talking about a hijacking from 1971 today.
Oh, for sure.
He isn't a typical criminal. He is a blank canvas.
And society projects its own values onto that canvas.
How do you mean?
Well, if you harbor a distrust of authority or corporate systems, you might look at Cooper as a folk hero.
Sure, the guy who stuck it to the man.
Right. He beat the airlines, outsmarted the FBI, and did it without physically harming a single hostage. To some, he is the ultimate anti-hero.
But on the flip side,
Conversely, if you prioritize public safety, you see a reckless, selfish terrorist who endangered the lives of 36 innocent people and a flight crew just to steal money.
right, because we don't know who he is, he can be whatever the observer wants him to be.
It is an incredible narrative arc.
It really is.
Yeah.
You start the day observing a polite, quiet man in a dark suit drinking a bourbon in C-18C.
Yeah.
And you end the day hunting a phantom who fell through the freezing sky over the Pacific Northwest.
He is either sitting on a beach somewhere having executed the perfect crime, or his molecules are permanently absorbed into the roots of the Washington pine forests.
He traded his physical identity for permanent residence in American mythology.
He became the skyward ghost.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want you to consider one final, provocative theory about those 3 bundles of cash found on the riverbank.
Oh, this is a good one.
We know the FBI scoured the landing zone for years and found absolutely no trace of the man, his parachute, or the bomb. We know the rubber bands on the cash were impossibly intact for having been exposed to the elements for 9 years. What if the money wasn't lost by accident and wasn't washed down by a flood? What if those bundles were a deliberate decoy?
A decoy.
Think about it. If you survive the impossible jump and realize the entire country is hunting you, you need them looking in the wrong place.
Right, misdirection.
Burying just enough marked bills on a riverbank creates a narrative. It tells the authorities he fell in the river, he drowned, keep dragging the water.
It gives them a breadcrumb trail that leads straight to a dead end.
Exactly. Buying you the time and the space to walk away with the other $194,000 into a brand new life.
It would be the final brilliant move in a flawlessly executed disappearing act.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the unknown. We will leave you to examine the evidence and decide the fate of Dan Cooper for yourself. Until next time.